I want to be honest about something before I tell you the rest. I didn't quit the Hargrove Hotel because I found something. I quit because I started understanding it. And that distinction matters more than you'd think. The Hargrove sits on the eastern edge of Meridian, Ohio, about 40 minutes from anything you'd recognize as a town. It's the kind of hotel that exists because a highway off-ramp exists. 3 stories, 106 rooms, continental breakfast from 6 to 9, a pool that's been drained since before I started. The kind of place where the ice machine is louder than any conversation you'll hear after midnight. I was hired for the overnight shift, 11 to 7, 5 nights a week, $9.60 an hour, which was low even for Meridian. But I needed the work, and the Hargrove needed someone willing to sit behind a desk from sundown to sunrise without complaining. The interview lasted about 4 minutes. The general manager, a woman named Deidre, asked me 2 questions. The first was whether I could stay awake through an 8-hour shift without using my phone excessively. The second was whether I had any issue working alone. I told her no to both. She nodded, slid a single-page contract across the desk, and said, "You'll mostly be by yourself. That's the nature of the shift. Some people can't handle the quiet." I told her quiet was fine. She looked at me for a moment, not suspiciously, more like she was measuring something. Then she said, "Good, because the building talks at night. Pipes, vents, settling. You'll get used to it." I remember thinking that was an odd thing to say during a job interview. I signed the contract and started the following Monday. The first 2 weeks were exactly what I expected. Nothing. Not nothing in a mysterious way. Nothing in the most literal, deadening sense of the word. The lobby was a wide, low-ceilinged room with beige carpet that smelled faintly of mildew and industrial cleaner. The fluorescent lights above the front desk buzzed at a frequency that burrowed into the back of your skull after the first hour and became a permanent texture of the air by the third. There was a television mounted in the corner near the vending machines that played a 24-hour news channel on mute, the closed captions lagging about 6 seconds behind the footage. A coffee station with a pot that I was supposed to keep fresh, but that nobody ever touched. Most nights, between 11 and 7, I'd check in maybe 2 or 3 guests, late arrivals, truck drivers, sometimes a family that had been driving too long and needed a place to stop. They'd come through the front doors looking dazed and road numb, hand me a credit card, and disappear upstairs without saying much. After that, silence. Not true silence. The Hargrove had its own kind of noise. The ventilation system cycled on and off every 20 minutes or so, filling the building with a low, pressurized hum that made your ears adjust without you noticing. When it cut off, the absence was sudden and physical, like the building had stopped breathing. You'd sit there in the stillness, hearing your own pulse in your ears, and then the system would kick back on with a shudder that traveled through the walls. Rain was common out there, the kind of steady, flattened rain that doesn't so much fall as simply exists in the air. It would hit the lobby windows in uneven waves, and at certain hours when the vents were off and the television was cycling through commercials, the sound of rain on glass was the only thing between me and total sensory deprivation. I read a lot during those first weeks, brought paperbacks, ate gas station sandwiches at 3 in the morning, watched the parking lot through the front windows and counted headlights on the highway in the distance. Tried not to think about how quiet my apartment was going to be when I got home. The exhaustion hit differently than I expected. It wasn't dramatic. There was no moment where I slapped myself awake or poured cold water on my face. It was slower than that, subtler. Around 4 a.m, reality would soften at the edges. Colors would flatten, sounds would delay. I'd look at the clock and genuinely not know if I'd been staring at the wall for 3 minutes or 30. My thoughts would loop. I'd start a sentence in my head and lose it halfway through, then find it again 10 minutes later as if no time had passed. Overnight work does something to your sense of continuity. The world outside stops confirming that you exist. There are no phone calls, no emails. No one walks past the window. You become a fixed point in a space that isn't quite real and isn't quite not. And after a while, that starts to feel normal, which is the part that should worry you. The notes started during my 3rd week. Let me explain what I mean because it sounds stranger than it was, at least at first. Part of the night clerk's job at the Hargrove was managing guest correspondence, not emails or phone messages, physical notes. Handwritten, folded once, and placed in the wooden mail slots behind the front desk. Each slot was labeled with a room number. If a guest received a delivery, or if maintenance needed to communicate something, or if there was an issue with their billing, you'd write a note and tuck it into their slot. When they came down in the morning, you'd hand it over. It was an antiquated system. Most hotels had moved to digital notifications years ago. But the Hargrove was the kind of place that operated on routines established decades earlier and saw no reason to update them. During training, the day clerk, a man named Gerald who'd worked there for 11 years and spoke in a monotone so flat it barely qualified as speech, showed me the note procedure. He pulled a yellow notepad from beneath the desk, wrote something on it, folded it, and slipped it into the slot for room 214. Guest in 214 requested extra towels yesterday, he said. Housekeeping forgot, so I'm letting them know they'll be delivered by noon. Simple enough. What Gerald didn't explain, and what I didn't discover until later, was that some of the notes in those slots had been there for a long time. I noticed it one night during a slow stretch around 2 a.m. I was restocking the brochure rack near the desk when I glanced at the mail slots and realized that several of them had notes in them. Not 1 or 2, maybe 15 or 16 slots, each with a folded yellow note tucked inside. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed they were from the day shift, messages for current guests who hadn't picked them up yet. But something about the volume felt off. We rarely had more than 20 rooms occupied on any given night. 15 or 16 notes seemed like a lot. I pulled one out, room 118. The note was written in blue ink, in handwriting I didn't recognize. Mrs. Calloway, your prescription refill has been placed at the front desk per your request. Please retrieve it at your convenience. Thank you for your continued stay. I checked the system. Room 118 was vacant, had been vacant for over a week. I pulled another. Room 206, Mr. Desmond. The temperature adjustment you requested has been applied to your room. If you continue to experience discomfort, please do not hesitate to contact us. We appreciate your patience during your recovery. Room 206, also vacant. Checked out 5 days ago. I pulled a third. Room 312, Ms. Aldrich. Per your request, we have adjusted your meal schedule. Breakfast will now be delivered to your room at 7:15 a.m. rather than the standard time. Your attending physician has approved the change. I stopped. I read that last line again. Your attending physician has approved the change. This was a hotel. There were no attending physicians. There were no meal deliveries to rooms. There was no recovery. These notes read like they'd been written for patients in a long-term care facility, not guests at a budget roadside hotel. I checked all 16 notes. Every single one was addressed to a guest who had already checked out, some of them weeks ago. 1. Room 107, addressed to a Mr. Harlan, referenced a checkout date that was 3 months in the past. The notes were calm, professional, and specific. They referenced medical accommodations, dietary restrictions, medication schedules, mobility assistance, and room temperature preferences with a clinical precision that felt entirely disconnected from the building I was standing in. I put them all back. I don't know why. That's the honest answer. Something about the notes felt intentional, not random, not accidental. They'd been placed in those slots carefully, folded neatly, written with purpose. And some part of me understood in a way I couldn't articulate that removing them would be noticed. I finished my shift without mentioning it. The next night I checked the slots again. The notes were still there, but 3 new ones had been added. 2 of them were for rooms that had been vacant for over a week. The third was for room 224, which had checked out that morning. I read the new one for 224. Mr. Fontaine, we hope your stay has been restful. As discussed with Dr. Ellison, your follow-up has been scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. If transportation is needed, please inform the front desk no later than Wednesday evening. We wish you well in your continued care. Dr. Ellison. I searched the name in the hotel system. Nothing. I searched it on my phone. The only result that came back was an obituary from 2011 for a Dr. Howard Ellison, a physician who had practiced at a facility in Meridian County. The facility was called the Hargrove Medical Center. I stared at the screen. Then I looked up at the lobby ceiling, at the long fluorescent fixtures, at the industrial tile beneath the carpet edges, at the width of the hallways, at the oversized elevator with its stainless steel interior. I'd been told the hotel was built in 1987, that it had always been a hotel. But the bones of the building told a different story. The hallways were too wide. The rooms were too uniformly sized. The elevator was too large. The stairwell doors were fitted with push-bar mechanisms that you typically only see in institutional buildings. The windows on the 3rd floor had been sealed shut with hardware that wasn't cosmetic. It was structural. I realized it sitting there at 2:30 in the morning with rain streaking down the lobby windows and the vents cycling off into silence, that the Hargrove Hotel had not always been a hotel. And someone on the staff was still writing notes, as if it wasn't one now. I started paying attention in a different way after that, not anxiously, not like someone who'd seen a ghost, more like someone who'd been reading a document in dim light and suddenly realized the font had changed 3 pages back. The information was there all along, I just hadn't been looking at it correctly. The first thing I noticed was the east wing. The Hargrove was shaped roughly like a squared-off U. The lobby and front desk occupied the base. The west wing extended to the left. 3 floors of guest rooms accessed by the main elevator and a stairwell. The east wing mirrored it on the right, but with one difference. It was closed. A pair of double doors on the ground floor separated the east wing from the main lobby hallway. They were heavy, institutional, again, not hotel doors. And they were locked with a deadbolt that required a key I'd never been given. A small plastic sign hung from a suction cup on the glass. Wing closed for renovation. We apologize for the inconvenience. The sign was yellowed. The suction cup was cracked. Whatever renovation it was apologizing for had either been completed long ago or never started. I asked Gerald about it during shift change one morning. East Wing's been closed since before I started, he said, not looking up from the logbook he was reviewing. Structural thing, I think. Foundation issue. For 11 years. Longer, probably. They just never got around to it. What's in there? Gerald paused. It was subtle. A half-second delay. The kind of pause that happens when someone's deciding between the truth and the version of the truth they've been told to give. Rooms, he said, same as the West Wing, just empty. He turned a page in the logbook and didn't say anything else. I let it go, but I started watching those double doors. The thing about the East Wing is that it wasn't entirely dormant. I noticed it first through sound. Around 1 or 2 in the morning, when the lobby was at its quietest and the ventilation had cycled off, I could hear something coming from beyond those double doors. Not loud, not alarming, just present. A low rhythmic tapping. Metal on metal, faint and distant, like someone adjusting the frame of a bed, and sometimes it was accompanied by a thin, pressurized hissing. The kind of sound old pneumatic systems make when they're still pressurized but haven't been serviced in years. The first time I heard it, I walked over to the double doors and pressed my ear against the glass. The sound was there, muffled but distinct. Tapping, hissing, and underneath it, so faint I might have imagined it, a hum, not mechanical, lower, more organic, like a voice sustaining a single note at the very bottom of its register. I stepped back. The second thing I noticed was the lights. From the parking lot, if you stood at the right angle, you could see the windows of the East Wing. They were dark, as you'd expect from a closed section of the building, but twice during my first month, I saw a light on. Not a full light, not a room light, something dimmer, bluish. The kind of ambient glow that comes from a monitor or a piece of medical equipment left in standby mode. It was on the second floor, third window from the end. It was there for maybe 20 minutes, and then it wasn't. The third thing was the elevator. The Hargrove had one guest elevator, located in the lobby near the front desk. It served all 3 floors and had a basement button that was covered with a metal plate and a small padlock. Standard enough. But the elevator did something at night that I couldn't explain. It moved on its own. Not frequently, maybe once or twice a week. I'd be sitting at the desk, and the elevator doors would open, no one inside, and then close again. The display above the doors would show the car moving, lobby to second floor to third floor back to the lobby, as if someone had called it, ridden it, and sent it back. But the hallway cameras showed nothing. No one got on. No one got off. I mentioned it to the maintenance tech, a man named Dwayne, who came in 3 mornings a week and smelled like cigarette smoke and WD-40. Elevator's old, he said. Probably a relay issue. I'll look at it. He didn't look at it. 2 weeks later, I mentioned it again. He said the same thing, almost word for word, as if he'd memorized the response. Then he picked up his toolbox and walked toward the East Wing, stopped at the double doors, and stood there for a moment without moving. He didn't go through them. He just stood there, looking at the glass, and then turned around and went out the back exit. I watched him through the security monitors. He walked to his truck, sat in the cab for several minutes, and then drove away. He wasn't scheduled to leave for another 3 hours. I want to talk about what exhaustion does, because it's relevant to what happened next. And I need you to understand the distinction between what I saw and what I might have seen. By my second month at the Hargrove, I was sleeping roughly 4 hours a day, sometimes 5. My body had adapted to the overnight schedule in the way that a bone adapts to a fracture. It heals, but it heals wrong. I could stay awake through the shift without difficulty, but the quality of my wakefulness had changed. I was present, but not sharp. Aware, but not discerning. The world had a thin, laminated quality to it, like I was looking at everything through a layer of plastic wrap. My memory became unreliable in small ways. I'd pour a cup of coffee and then find it on the counter 10 minutes later, full and cold, with no recollection of having set it down. I'd start writing in the logbook and realize I'd written the same entry twice, word for word, on consecutive lines. I'd hear a sound and not be able to determine whether it had just happened or whether I was remembering it from the night before. This matters because the things I'm about to describe happened during this period, and I can't tell you with complete certainty that every detail is accurate. What I can tell you is that the details are consistent, and that they fit together, that they form a pattern, and that the pattern points in a direction that I'm not comfortable with. It was a Wednesday night, about 6 weeks into the job. Around 3 in the morning, and I was doing my hourly walkthrough of the West Wing, a requirement of the position, mostly to check for fire hazards and make sure no doors were propped open. The hallways were empty, lit by the same flat fluorescence that gave everything the color of old bone. I was on the second floor, passing room 216, when I heard it. A sound from above. Not from the third floor, from the ceiling. From inside of the ceiling, in the space between floors, where the ductwork and wiring ran. It was a rhythmic scraping, metal against metal, slow and deliberate, like someone dragging a piece of equipment across a grated surface. I stopped. The sound continued for about 15 seconds. Then it stopped. Then, from somewhere far down the hallway, farther than the hallway should have extended, I heard a door close. Not slam, close. Gently. The kind of click a latch makes when someone is being careful not to be heard. I looked down the hall. The West Wing ended at room 232. Beyond that was a wall. But the sound had come from beyond that wall, from the East Wing. I walked to the end of the hallway. The wall was solid, painted the same institutional cream as everything else. But at the baseboard, I noticed something. A thin line of light, not bright, not steady. It pulsed faintly, like it was coming from a source on the other side that was cycling on and off. I knelt down and put my hand against the wall. It was warm. Not room temperature warm, body warm. The kind of warmth that comes from a space that's heated and occupied. I stood up and went back to the lobby. I didn't write it in the logbook. I'm not sure why. Something about writing it down felt like it would make it official, and I wasn't ready for that. I told myself it was ductwork, heating anomalies. The building settling in ways that old buildings do. But the wall was warm, and the light was there. 2 days later, I found the charts. It happened by accident. There was a supply closet behind the front desk, a narrow, deep closet where we kept printer paper, registration cards, key card blanks, and the backup logbooks. I'd been in it dozens of times. But that night, reaching for a box of envelopes on the top shelf, I knocked over a stack of folders that had been pushed to the back, behind the reams of paper, as if someone had deliberately hidden them. There were 9 folders, manila, standard medical chart folders with the metal fastener clips at the top. Each one had a name on the tab, handwritten in the same blue ink as the notes in the mail slots. I opened the first one. It was a patient chart, a real one, complete with intake forms, medication logs, vital sign records, dietary notes, and physician observations. The patient's name was Ruth Calloway, the same Mrs. Calloway from the note in room 118's mail slot. The intake date was March 14th, 2008. The facility listed on the header was the Hargrove Medical Center, Department of Extended Residential Care. The attending physician was Dr. H. Ellison. The chart was active. That's what made my hands go cold. Not active from 2008. Active now. The most recent entry was dated 2 days ago. It documented a routine check, vital signs, medication administration, a brief behavioral observation. The handwriting was neat, clinical, and entirely matter-of-fact. Patient resting comfortably, vitals within expected range, mild agitation noted at 0200, resolved without intervention, meal intake adequate, continue current protocol. I looked at the date again, 2 days ago, Tuesday. I had been working Tuesday night. I had been sitting at this desk in this lobby, 30 feet from this closet, while someone had written a clinical note about a patient in a facility that hadn't existed in over a decade. I opened the second chart. Edward Desmond, room 206. Same format. Same physician. Same active status. Most recent entry yesterday the 3rd, Margaret Aldrich, room 312, active, updated 3 days ago. I went through all 9. Every chart was current. Every patient corresponded to a note in the mail slots. Every room number matched a room in the Hargrove. Some in the West Wing, some in rooms I couldn't identify. Rooms with numbers that didn't exist on any floor map I'd seen. Room 108-E, room 215-E, room 301-E. The E suffix, East Wing. I should have left, I know that. You're thinking it right now, and you're right. The reasonable thing, the sane thing, would have been to walk out, drive home, and never come back. Call someone, report something, stop showing up. But here's what you don't understand about working nights in a place like the Hargrove. You lose your sense of proportion. The things that should alarm you don't, because everything is already slightly alarming. The empty hallways, the cycling vents, the elevator moving on its own, the fluorescent buzz that becomes the baseline frequency of your existence. After weeks of that, your threshold for what qualifies as genuinely wrong shifts upward. You accommodate, you normalize, you tell yourself that strange things happen in old buildings at 3 a.m, and that the people who've worked here for years seem fine, so it must be fine. I put the charts back, I arranged them the way I'd found them, behind the paper, and I closed the closet door. Then I sat at the desk and watched the rain on the windows and tried to convince myself that there was an explanation. The next shift, I started watching the staff more carefully, not obviously. I didn't ask direct questions or act suspicious. I just paid attention in ways I hadn't before. Gerald, the day clerk, was the most obviously avoidant. He spoke in short, deflective sentences and never made eye contact for more than a second. When I mentioned anything about the East Wing, he'd change the subject with a fluidity that felt rehearsed, not nervous, not evasive in a guilty way, more like someone who'd been trained to redirect, the way hospital staff are trained to redirect confused patients. Calmly, automatically, without acknowledging what they're doing. The housekeeping crew was small. 3 women who came in at 6 a.m. and were usually finishing by the time I left. They worked in the West Wing exclusively, I never saw any of them go near the East Wing doors. But one of them, a woman named Louisa, who'd been there for 7 or 8 years, did something one morning that I couldn't stop thinking about. She was pushing her cart past the front desk, heading toward the elevator, when she paused and looked at the mail slots. She stood there for maybe 5 seconds, staring at the notes tucked into the slots for rooms that were empty. Then she reached out and adjusted one of them, straightened it, tucked it more neatly into the slot, the way you'd adjust a patient's blanket as you passed their bed, not because it needed adjusting, but because the routine demanded it. She didn't look at me. She didn't say anything. She just adjusted the note and kept walking. I watched the security guard too. His name was Carl. He was in his 50s, heavy, with a bad knee that made his rounds slow and deliberate. He carried a flashlight that he never turned on and a radio that he never used. His patrol route included the lobby, the West Wing hallways, and the parking lot. It did not include the East Wing. One night around midnight, I asked him directly, "Carl, you ever go into the East Wing?" He was standing by the coffee station, stirring a cup with a plastic straw. He stopped stirring, didn't look up. "No," he said. "How come?" "It's closed." "Right, but have you ever—" "It's closed." He said it the same way, same tone, same inflection, like a recording. Then he picked up his coffee, walked to the back hallway, and I didn't see him again for the rest of the shift. The intercom was the thing that broke the pattern for me, the thing that made it impossible to keep rationalizing. The Hargrove had an old PA system, the kind with wall-mounted speakers in every hallway and a console behind the front desk. The console had been disconnected years ago, according to Gerald. The speakers were still mounted, but inactive. You couldn't use them even if you wanted to. Except that one night around 2:15 in the morning, during one of the ventilation silences, I heard a voice come through them. Not all of them, just one. The speaker nearest the East Wing doors, mounted on the wall above a fire extinguisher. The voice was female, calm, clinical. The kind of voice you hear in hospital corridors at 3 a.m., steady, detached, delivering information to no one in particular. "Dr. Ellison to room 208-E. Dr. Ellison to room 208-E, please." It lasted 4 seconds. Then the speaker went silent, and the ventilation kicked back on, and the sound was buried under the hum. I stood there for a long time. Dr. Ellison had been dead for 15 years. After the intercom, things began to accumulate in ways I couldn't catalog fast enough. The notes in the mail slots multiplied. By the end of my second month, nearly every slot had something in it, including rooms that hadn't been occupied in weeks. The notes were always the same: polite, clinical, referencing medical procedures and physician approvals and recovery timelines. Some of them referenced rooms I knew didn't exist. Room 114-E, room 320-E, room 102-E. I started checking the hotel's occupancy records against the notes. The pattern was consistent. Every note was addressed to someone who had checked out. But the language treated them as if they were still present, still under care, still recovering. Mr. Webb. Your physical therapy session has been rescheduled to accommodate the adjusted medication schedule. Please allow the attending staff to assist you with mobility exercises. Your progress has been noted and appreciated. Mr. Webb had checked out 19 days ago. He'd stayed for 2 nights, paid with a visa, and left no forwarding information. A truck driver passing through. Nothing about him suggested he needed physical therapy or medication or attending staff. but someone was writing to him as if he'd never left. I started dreaming about the East Wing, which I mention only because the dreams had a quality that felt less like imagination and more like memory. In the dreams, I was walking the East Wing hallways. They looked like the West Wing, but older. Same layout, same dimensions, but with the carpet removed, exposing pale green linoleum that was cracked and curling at the edges. The rooms had no numbers on the doors. Instead, they had small clipboards mounted to the wall beside each frame, the kind you see outside hospital rooms for patient information cards. The clipboards were empty, but the rooms weren't. I never saw who was inside them. The doors were closed, but I could hear breathing. Slow, mechanical breathing, the kind that comes from a ventilator or a CPAP machine. And I could hear the sound of pens scratching on paper, someone writing, always writing. I'd wake up in my apartment with the sensation that I'd been standing, not lying down. My feet would be cold, as if I'd been walking on a hard floor. I know how this sounds. I know. In my 9th week, I did something I shouldn't have. It was a Saturday night. The hotel was nearly empty, 6 rooms occupied, all in the West Wing. Carl had done his patrol at midnight and retreated to his truck in the parking lot, where he usually spent the rest of the shift. Gerald wouldn't arrive until 6:30. I was alone. At 1:40 in the morning, I walked to the East Wing doors. They were locked, as always. The deadbolt was heavy, commercial grade. But I'd noticed something during my weeks of watching. The door frame was old. The wood around the strike plate was soft, compressed from years of humidity and settling. The deadbolt held, but the door itself had a 1/4 inch of give. I didn't force it. I didn't need to. I pressed my shoulder against the right side door and pushed steadily, and the frame flexed just enough for the bolt to clear the plate. The door swung inward about 8 inches. The air that came through the gap was different, warmer, denser. It smelled like rubbing alcohol and something else, something I couldn't identify immediately, but that my body recognized before my mind did. It was the smell of habitation, of sheets and skin and recycled air, of a space that was being lived in. Through the gap, I could see a hallway. It was dimly lit, not dark, but lit with a low amber glow that came from night lights mounted along the baseboards, the kind used in hospitals so that staff can navigate without disturbing patients. The floor was linoleum, pale green, cracked at the edges. The clipboards were there, mounted beside every door, and they weren't empty. I could see writing on them, names, dates, small grids that I recognized from the patient charts, vital sign records, medication times, initials of the administering nurse. I stood there, looking through the gap, and I heard it. Footsteps, not mine, not from behind me, from inside the East Wing. Soft, deliberate footsteps on linoleum. The sound of rubber-soled shoes, the kind nurses wear. They were moving away from me deeper into the hallway, unhurried and even. Then a door opened somewhere down the corridor. I heard the creak of hinges, the brief increase in the mechanical breathing sound, and the door closing again. The footsteps resumed, moved farther, faded. I let the door close. I went back to the desk. I sat down. I opened the logbook and wrote, "Shift uneventful. No incidents to report." The last thing I want to tell you is about the morning I left. It was my 10th week, a Tuesday. Gerald arrived at 6:30, same as always, carrying his thermos and his newspaper and wearing the same expression of committed blankness that he always wore. We did the shift change. I handed him the logbook. He handed me the outgoing keys. As I was putting on my jacket, I looked at the mail slots. There was a new note in one of them. Slot 103. Room 103 was in the West Wing. It was currently occupied. A woman had checked in the previous afternoon. I'd seen her come through the lobby around 9 p.m., mid-40s, quiet, carrying a small suitcase. She'd gone upstairs without stopping at the desk. I pulled the note from the slot. I told myself I'd hand it to Gerald, but I read it first. Ms. Navarro, your initial intake assessment has been completed. Based on the evaluation, Dr. Ellison has recommended a preliminary observation period of 72 hours. During this time, please remain in your room and allow staff to assist you as needed. Meals will be delivered at the scheduled times. If you experience discomfort, use the call button beside your bed. Welcome to the Hargrove. I put the note back. Gerald was watching me. Not with alarm, not with anger, with that same measuring look that Deidre had given me during my interview, like he was calculating something, like he was waiting to see what I would do. I picked up my bag and walked to the door. Have a good morning, Gerald said behind me. I didn't answer. I drove home. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment complex for 45 minutes. Then I went inside and called Deidre's number and told her I was done. She didn't ask why. She said she understood and that my final check would be mailed. That was it. No argument, no questions, no attempt to explain or reassure or convince me to stay, just, we understand. I looked up Ms. Navarro 2 weeks later. I don't know why. Curiosity, guilt. The feeling that I'd left something unfinished. There was no record of a Ms. Navarro checking into the Hargrove. Not on the night I remember. Not on any night. The room, 103, showed as vacant for the entire week surrounding the date in question. But the note had been there. The handwriting, the yellow paper, the fold. Welcome to the Hargrove. I drive past the highway exit for Meridian sometimes when I'm taking the long way to avoid construction. I can see the Hargrove from the road if I look at the right moment. 3 stories, east wing dark, west wing half lit, parking lot mostly empty. Once, about 4 months after I quit, I drove past at 3 a.m. I don't know what compelled me to look, but I did. The east wing was lit. Not fully, not brightly, but there were lights on, that same dim bluish glow, scattered across multiple floors, pulsing faintly behind sealed windows. I kept driving. Here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. The thing that sits in the back of my mind like a frequency I can't tune out. I worked at the Hargrove for 10 weeks. I checked in dozens of guests, families, truck drivers, salespeople, travelers. They came through the lobby, took their key cards, went upstairs, and most of them checked out the next morning and drove away. Most of them. But some of them, I only ever saw check in. I never saw them leave. And I'm no longer certain that they did. I don't know who's writing the notes. I don't know who's updating the charts. I don't know who's walking the hallways of the East Wing at 3 a.m, checking vitals and adjusting medications and delivering meals to rooms that shouldn't exist for patients who were never admitted. But the notes keep appearing. I'm sure of it. Because 6 months after I quit, I received a piece of mail. No return address, no postmark. Just a yellow piece of paper, folded once, tucked inside a plain white envelope. It said, "Dear Mr. Carras, we appreciate your time at the Hargrove and hope your experience was satisfactory. Should you wish to return, your room has been prepared. Dr. Ellison sends his regards. I don't know what room they're talking about. I never stayed at the Hargrove. I only worked there. At least, that's what I remember.